This is Atheist History Week, and I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and also a proud and active member of New York City Atheists, which produces this show. Each week at this time, what we do is look at significant events in the history of atheism and free thought. Things that happened during this week, back in the distant past, or the recent past, in the history of atheism, agnosticism, secularism, humanism, skepticism, rationalism, whatever you have-ism. We look at the famous, the not so famous sometimes, and even the infamous, who were born or died or achieved something during this calendar week, roughly this calendar week. We also look at events that happened, international congresses, conferences, publishing dates, premieres of plays, or, of course, religious fun and games like riots and burnings at the stake and witch trials, that kind of thing. All the religious fun and games that make life so interesting and worthwhile. Let's start this week's discussion, I should say, with one of those meetings. On September 3rd, in 1889, 5,000 freethinkers gathered in a place called Lille Jans in Sweden to protest the tyranny of the Lutheran Christian Church in Sweden. Scandinavia, throughout Scandinavia, not just in Sweden, the various Christian churches into the late 19th century really ran things and dictated what could and could not be done and what must be done in society. Today, Scandinavia is the most God-free region in all of Western civilization. Matter of fact, I recommend the book. I'm just trying to think of the author's name. I can't, but the name of the book is Society Without God. Makes it very clear that in all indexes of human happiness, that is health, relative wealth, and any other indications of societal happiness, human beings are a lot happier in Scandinavia than any place else in the Western world. And they also are the most God-free. The churches have long been divested of their power, but that meeting in 1889, where 5,000 freethinkers got together in Sweden, was the beginning of the free thought movement, not only in Sweden but in all of Scandinavia, that resulted in today's society. A Swedish freethinker named Victor E. Lennstrand gave a lecture at that meeting, the title of which was, "Is Christianity a Religion for Our Time?" Just asking the question, of course, was enough to get him arrested, which he was. He was raided at Uppsala University by police authorities in 1886 just for asking that same question in an article, and he was forced to resign his post at the university. He gave up teaching, but now did public lectures, and he did 3 months in jail for blasphemy, a crime, quote unquote, that our former mayor Rudy Giuliani would have liked to have reinstituted in New York, but okay, that's another story. He didn't recant while he was in prison, so they gave him another 3 months, and then later on in the year they gave him another 6 months. What, boy? Just for the hell of it, because they didn't like him. And but he was treated very badly in prison, became terribly ill, and of course the authorities had overreached themselves because the public outcry became so great that they had to let him out, and Lenstrad was a public hero and was pardoned by the king, who had a better sense of politics than the politicians and the priests. And he kept going and continued writing, lecturing, and was elected to the People's Congress in 1893. And someone we don't know very well, Victor Lenstrand, at an event that I didn't know about until I started doing this research very recently, the Freethinkers Rally in Sweden in 1889, which began on September 3rd, which led to the ousting of religion in Scandinavia and one of the happiest societies in the Western world. On September 1st in 1868, a British free thought advocate, again, not very well known anymore, by the name of Chapman Cohen was born. And starting at the age of 21, he began a 50-year career as a popular and concise free thought writer and thinker. He became the president, I think he was the second president of the National Secular Society in Great Britain. He reached that post in 1915, and he was the editor of its publication, The Free Thinker. He is often considered the last great Victorian free thinker. And I like this quote of his from his book, The Meaning and Value of Free Thought, which he published in 1932. Human society, he wrote, is born in the shadow of religious fear, and in that stage, the suppression of heresy is a sacred social duty. Then comes the rise of a priesthood, and the independent thinker is met with punishment in this world and the threat of eternal damnation hereafter. Even today, it is from the religious side that the greatest danger to freedom of thought comes. Religion is the last thing man will civilize. Chapman Cohen, born September 1st, 1868, and lived to 1954. Another not so well-known free thinker, but one who deserves our attention, is a woman by the name of Frances Wright. W-R-I-G-H-T. The first born on September 6th in 1795, and the first woman to publicly lecture in the United States. One of the reasons she could defy convention and wear her hair in ringlets instead of tightly bound, and wearing what were then called Turkish trousers rather than 6 layers of crinolines and satins and all the other thing that made women weigh an extra 30 pounds. The reason she could was because she was born rich in Scotland, and she was tall, and so that probably frightened a lot of small men who would have liked to have punched her out. At any rate, she and her sister Camilla traveled to America, where her first play, Altdorf, was staged and was a big success in New York in 1819. It was a big success, but it shocked New York, not because of the content of the play, but because she didn't use a masculine pseudonym. She put her own name on it. My goodness, a woman playwright. Anyway, she wrote a book about her travels in America called Views of Society and Manners in America, which was a huge sensation and success in Great Britain. And she became friends with freethinker Jeremy Bentham and with our French hero of our Revolutionary War, Lafayette. She returned to England And after this amazing career, she was still only 29 years old. She returned to America and became an American citizen and immediately started to work on abolitionist work, the freedom of slaves. She began a model communal plantation that really never had a chance, depended upon the goodwill of all the people involved. In Nashoba, very well known at the time, they would have no religion in Nashoba, she wrote, except kind feeling and kind action. Yeah, well, if you depend upon kind feeling and kind action, there are always going to be a couple of people who are going to take advantage of you, and of course that happened. In calling for the end of slavery, she also called for the destruction of the slavery of the mind that was holding women back. She called particularly for the education of women and for the rejection of religion, for which she was called the red harlot of infidelity and the voluptuous preacher of licentiousness. Turn your churches into halls of science, she wrote. Exchange your teachers of faith for expounders of nature. Fill the vacuums of your mind. She, after the failure of the Nashoba experiment, she bought an old church in New York City and renamed it the Hall of Science and opened its doors for lectures in a radical bookstore. And she and Robert Dale Owen, whom we've spoken about previously on this show, launched the Free Inquirer and the Working Men's Party. Remember, women did not have the right to vote, so it was the Working Men's Party. And she, which advocated the radical idea of a 10-hour workday. Unfortunately, on her personal life, when her marriage broke up, according to the customs of the times and her own notoriety, when she and her husband divorced, the courts gave her daughter to her husband because she was considered not a fit mother. She died in 1852 at a relatively young age after breaking her hip in a fall. In Divisions of Knowledge in 1828, she wrote, I am not going to question your opinions. I'm not going to meddle with your belief. I am not going to dictate to you mine. All that I say is examine, inquire, look into the nature of things, search out grounds for your opinions, that for and those for and those against. Know why you believe, understand what you believe, and possess a reason for the faith that is in you. For that kind of writing, she was called the voluptuous preacher of licentiousness and the red harlot of infidelity. Frances Wright, born September 6, 1795. I think I'd like to have met her. Let's jump ahead a few days on the calendar because I'd like to devote some time to the next subject. He was born September 10th in 1941 and unfortunately died at the age of 60 in 2002. I'm talking about Stephen Jay Gould. The paleontologist and author whose column in Natural History magazine I would read the moment the magazine arrived in my mailbox, or when I got it upstairs from the mailbox. And even if I didn't read anything else in the magazine that month, which is a problem, Natural History magazine, since he retired because of sickness. He was born and grew up in New York City, and one of the things I love about him, he was a crazy baseball fan. And he applied scientific thinking to baseball and explained, if anybody wants to know, look it up, why there are no more 400 hitters in baseball and why no pitchers win 30 games. Interesting. And, but anyway, he's a professor of geology and zoology at Harvard. Was named Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology in 1982. Discover magazine called him Scientist of the Year in 81, and he achieved even greater fame by being cartoonized, as they called it, on The Simpsons TV show. His book, The Mismeasure of Man, won the National Book Critics Circle Award in 1982, and many of his other books, his columns in natural history, were collected in book form, including Ever Since Darwin, Reflections on Natural History in 1980, The Panda's Thumb in 1981, which won the American Book Award for Science, Hen's Teeth and Horse's Toes in 1983, and Wonderful Life in 1990, which is a wonderful book, and I recommend it. His last book, The Structure of Evolutionary Theory, was a huge one, which he began when he was first diagnosed with cancer, and in that book, and another one, name I'm trying to remember, he advanced the evolutionary theory of punctuated equilibrium, which was called by some people evolution by jerks. And I don't mean people who are jerks. I mean jerks that, in other words, evolution does not proceed majestically, slowly, but moves along and then suddenly gathers speed and then moves along and then gathers speed again. That kind of thing. Evolution by jerks. Punctuated equilibrium, Gould called it. And he was nicknamed the Bulldog of Evolutionary Biology for his commitment to popularizing the understanding of evolution. And he was Humanist Laureate in the Council for Secular Humanism's International Academy of Humanism, and appeared at many free thought and humanist events. The only thing that I ever disagreed with Gould about, and of course he's an expert and I'm an amateur, was his argument in Rock of Ages, Science and Religion in the Fullness of Life, that he argued that science and religion do not need to be in conflict, that they are non-overlapping magisteria, his phrase, non-overlapping magisteria, which meant that they address different areas and that they don't have to be in conflict. What he was doing, I think, Gould, was copping out of the argument that is, I think, beyond dispute. That 9 out of 10 scientists are not trying to disprove religion or get people to stop believing in God, but that religion is constantly trying to stop science. And Gould was trying to ameliorate, trying to find a middle position, whereas the problem is the religious fanatics on our right wing in America don't want it, and they're not going to have it. He and also, as the Freedom from Religion Foundation wrote in its biography of Gould, that non-overlapping magisteria thing seemed to grant religion default authority over ethical questions, which it shouldn't have. The track history of religion about ethics is terrible. You're talking about a concept or a practice, I should say, that in every religion and in every area of the world at some time or other has done the equivalent of burn people at the stake for what they think. Okay. But what endeared us all to Stephen Jay Gould was his wonderful way of bringing the story of evolution into clear I don't mean simple, but clear and easily understood logical arguments. In Life, in December 1988, the magazine, in an interview, he told that huge audience, that readership of that very popular magazine, "We are here because one odd group of fishes had a peculiar fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures. Because the Earth never froze entirely during an ice age, because a small and tenuous species arising in Africa 250,000 years ago has managed, so far, to survive by hook and by crook. We may yearn for a higher answer, but none exists." And in the chapter Pleasant Dreams from An Urchin in a Storm, which he published in 1987, he wrote about the religious sensibility. "It seems the height of antiquated hubris to claim that the universe carried on as it did for billions of years in order to form a comfortable abode for us. Chance and historical contingency give the world of life most of its glory and fascination. I sit here happy to be alive and sure that some reason must exist for why me. Or the earth might have been totally covered with water, and an octopus might now be telling its children why the eight-legged God of all things had made such a perfect world for cephalopods. Sure we fit. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. But the world wasn't made for us, and it will endure without us." Stephen Jay Gould, born September 10th in 1941, and untimely dead at the age of 60 in 2002. So this week we've concentrated pretty much on Stephen Jay Gould, and the paleontologist and prolific author of many, many books, and a free thinker and atheist till the day he died. And we have also taken a closer look at Chapman Cohen, the British free thinker who was one of the leading lights of free thought and atheism in the early part of the 20th century in Great Britain, and Frances Wright, that outrageous woman who had the nerve to foist her free thought ideas on the American public in the early and mid 19th century. And we began the talk this evening by referring to the free thought rally of 5,000 free thinkers in Sweden in 1889 that began the disestablishment movement in Scandinavia that led to one of the most happy and godless societies in the world in Scandinavia today. A society that is analyzed in a book called Society Without God, which since I first mentioned it 15 minutes or so ago, our crack team of researchers tells me was written indeed by Phil Zuckerman, which name Ken Bronstein had remembered, but I didn't. That's this week in history. Next week, for roughly the second week in September, we will look at a few things and people of interest. How could we not pay attention to another great woman in the history of free thought, Margaret Sanger, and Jessica Mitford. And we will look also at, I'm going to read a little bit of JFK, President Kennedy's speech to the ministers in Houston during the 1960 presidential campaign, when those know-nothings were worried that he was going to have to get his marching orders from the Pope every morning. And JFK delivered one of the better speeches about separation of church and state in America. And then we'll have some fun. We'll wind up by giving you lots and lots of quotes from H.L. Mencken, who just tore apart what he called the bourgeoisie in America in the 19-teens, 20s, and 30s. That'll be next week, roughly the second week in atheist history, the second week in September in atheist history, and I hope you'll be back here with us. I'll be here, and I hope you will too. Thank you for watching, and good night.
Wherever we once were, we are no longer a Christian nation, at least not just. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, and a Buddhist nation, and a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers.